Good day, and welcome to our webinar on how to become a Preventive Maintenance All-Star, brought to you by CFE Media and Technology and sponsored by Dude Solutions. Today we'll be joined by Paul LaChance, Senior Manufacturing Advisor at Dude Solutions, and William Hoff, Director of Facilities and Environmental Services at JMA Wireless. Stay tuned to learn the benefits of becoming a PM All-Star, where you fall on the continuum from firefighting to proactive maintenance, a crawl, walk, run plan for continuous improvement, the other PM, predictive maintenance and the Internet of Things, and finally, next steps for finding a partner to help you get started on the journey to becoming a PM All-Star. To get the best results from the webcast platform, please make note of the following as you participate in today's event. If you are having technical problems with audio or the slide presentation, click on the question mark at the top right-hand corner of your screen to bring up a list of system checks to make. If you are experiencing issues with your slides or audio, please refresh the browser or click the Refresh Media button directly under the presenter's headshot. If you do need a technician, type a message into the Ask a Question box and someone will get to you as quickly as possible. Individual technical questions will be answered in the Answered Questions area. During the presentation, you can also use the Ask a Question box on the left side of your screen to type questions for the live Q&A session at the end. You may ask questions at any time during the presentation. We'll get to as many as time allows. To download the presentation slides and certificate of completion, use the Event Resources box on the left-hand side of the screen. You can download the presentation and certificate of completion until the conclusion of the webcast. The link will break when the webcast signs off. This webcast is being recorded, including the Q&A session. We'll send you an email message within a week with a direct link to the webcast archive. I'd now like to introduce you to today's speakers. William Hoff is a Facilities and Environmental Management Director and Consultant. He currently holds the title Director of Facilities and Environmental Services with JMA Wireless. He has launched programs that move companies from reactive to preventive maintenance using both CMMS and in-house solutions in the fields of healthcare, manufacturing, education, and finance. Paul LaChance has devoted his entire career to optimizing maintenance teams by enabling data-driven decisions and actionable insights. He wrote his first CMMS system in 2004 and has been designing and directing CMMS and EAM systems ever since. As a regular speaker at national trade shows, he's been featured at IMTS, FabTech, and SMRP. He currently serves as the Senior Manufacturing Advisor for Dude Solutions. Paul, welcome to today's webinar, and please go ahead.
Thank you, Kevin, and thank you, everybody, for being here today. We're going to be talking about being a PM All-Star and what it takes to become a PM All-Star. From my perspective, there's a spectrum of maintenance operations. Some of you on this webinar today might be in that end of the spectrum where you're in that more firefighting mode. You never seem to have enough hours in the day. You're rarely able to get to any preventive maintenance because you're constantly moving from one work order to the next critical work order. On the other end of the spectrum, you're proactive, you're in control. You have a heavy dose of preventive maintenance. And probably as a result, if you are one of those PM All-Stars, you probably enjoy a more relaxed environment, things are more in control, and probably enjoy greater profitability. And we're going to talk about that. How do you move up that spectrum from that firefighting mode into that proactive and control? How do you become a PM All-Star? So we're going to break it down into where are you in this spectrum? It's a continuous improvement process. Nobody goes from being firefighting mode to relaxing on the beach in a lawn chair. There's a crawl, walk, run methodology which we like to use. What are the benefits of being a PM All-Star?
I have late checkout at 2 o'clock.
There are many benefits to being a PM All-Star, financial and operational otherwise. We'll also be talking about some technologies of the future. So just a little bit about Dude Solutions. Dude Solutions has been around. We just celebrated our 20th anniversary. We've been around for a while. We've got 700 or so employees. We've got a lot of experience in maintenance management operations through those years. Clients, 12,000 plus clients that are geographically scattered all around this country. They're places all around the globe. And from that experience, we're able to create our flagship product, Asset Essentials, our computerized maintenance manufacturing system, which the webinar is not specifically about ours. It's any good quality CMMS system can get you there, but we're very proud of ours. Everything from purchasing, inventory, reporting and analysis, work orders, preventive and predictive maintenance, asset management, mobility, and so forth. So as I go through this webinar today, we will be featuring certain aspects of software that can help you achieve those PM All-Star status and all the wonderful benefits that go with that. So if you ever want a more formal demo on our solution, just reach out. There's contact information we'll make available to you. So the first thing we need to find out is, where are you? And before I make comments on understanding where you are, I'm going to put up a poll question. And if you could just take a couple of moments here, it's going to appear on your screen. There will be a poll question will appear. And if you could just take a moment to read that and be honest, because that's a big part of this, is to really see where are you in this spectrum, from the range of a heavy dose of preventive maintenance at 90% PM, 10% reactive, and then working down that spectrum to the other end where you're really doing a very small percentage of preventive maintenance, and it's mostly that corrective maintenance, that firefighting end of the spectrum. So I'm going to give everybody a couple of moments here to go ahead and put their results in here. Yep, I see the data's coming in, and we'll maybe give it another 15 to 20 seconds here to let everybody have a chance to respond, then we'll go ahead and show the results. All right, I think we've got probably enough of these in to show the results of this. All right, so okay. It's interesting, and what we're going to find here is the results show a pretty typical spectrum that I often see when looking at this. There's a small percentage of us on this call, and this is okay, but there's a small percentage of the people that are on that true proactive end, and the majority of us are in that 50 to 25 to even 10% preventive maintenance, and some of us that haven't gone anywhere. And it doesn't matter where you are in the spectrum. What's important is that you own it. You admit. You don't keep your head in the sand. The first steps in making improvements, the first steps in becoming a PM All-Star is to get everybody on the team together, to see where you're at, own that, and then we're going to start to pick small and incremental goals to improve. For those of you who called that were honest and said we have a very little preventive maintenance, that's awesome. You may go from 5% preventive maintenance to 10%, and then maybe 15%. Those of you in the 75% range, well, you may work up more. The key here is that you are own where you are and start to really look for improvements. SMRP, the Society of Maintenance and Reliability Professionals, which is a wonderful organization if you're not involved. It's a generic professional maintenance organization. They preach in their standards that an 80-20 rule, 80% proactive, 20% reactive or corrective, is considered stability. That's just considered stable. 90-10 rule, that's considered world-class. It's rare that I come across organizations that are at that level, but it's what we aspire to get at. And when you do meet people, and I saw some of the results in here, those people that are at that level, I like to call them the enlightened ones. They're the ones that have really got a good handle on this. But it's all relative. It doesn't matter. Just improve. Let me bring in Bill here, if you could talk a little bit about where you were and where you're able to get to.
Sure. Thanks, Paul. So here at JMA Wireless, when we first started, they essentially had no preventative maintenance program. We were about 90% reactive. We started out by rolling out on some smaller machine groups, and through time, we hit 80%. And over the past 8 to 9 months, we're actually hovering around 92%. We fluctuate a little bit here and there, but we are now about 92% preventative in this building.
That's the model that we all aspire to get to. And I think as we go through this call today, Bill will be able to share several of the benefits that's given his organization by achieving that goal. So again, it's a continuous improvement process. I love this cartoon on the left there. Who wants to change? Everybody wants things to be better. But then when you come into who wants to change, add that little 2-letter word in there, that's where things start to become a little more difficult. And that's where even before the whole conversation about software comes into play, is you got to make sure your organization is ready to actively work to improve this, to become a PM All-Star, because it is going to take some effort, but that effort will really pay off. The continuous improvement process that we use at Dude Solutions, and we coach our clients through this, not only with the software, but the services to do this, is you start with this continuous APM model, which is assess, prioritize, plan, execute, and maintain. And really what it starts with is when you assess, why are we fighting so many fires? What are the reasons? What are our goals? What are our objectives? What are our pain points? You kind of make that wish list. And then you're going to have to prioritize what you're going to address. You're not going to get it all done at once. It's too overwhelming and too daunting of a task. You then work, and we work with our clients to do this. In the software, you start to configure the software. You set up the software. You make sure your users understand how you're going to start to be more proactive around these things. You start using the software on a day-to-day basis, and eventually, as you're using, you start to see these small victories around improving some of these percentages. And being a continuous process, you're right back at the beginning where you're going to take the next item and the next item that you want to address. Crawl, walk, run. So this slide right here is called the PF curve. And if you're not familiar with the PF curve, and it's a bit of an eye chart, I'm going to walk you through it. And I'm going to have you train your eyes across the top. You see those big initials, DIPF. The goal of maintenance operations is to push up the PF curve. So when you start on that upper left there, the D, the original design, that is when you get an asset, a production asset in your facility that's going to be installed, and that's the I. It actually gets physically installed, and it's about to go into operation. It's going to go into production. That asset at that time is probably the best it's going to perform in its life. Give or take. I mean, I'm being general here. Over time, that asset is being used. You hit the P. And the P is the point where failure can be detected. It's incredibly subtle. That asset's brand new or it's not that old and it's humming along. You can't see it. You can't smell it. You can't hear it. But eventually assets start to degrade in performance. It's natural. Over time, you're going down that curve. And as you go down that curve, if an asset is left unmaintained, you're going to hit the F, the functional failure. And that's when the asset is no longer able to keep up with the demand that it's needed. It's not able to function as it was intended. And now you're starting to get poorer quality production. You're getting more energy consumed. You're at risk of more downtime. If you are ignoring those problems below the F, all the way down the bottom of that PF curve is failure, catastrophic failure. That's downtime. And downtime is profit killing. It's morale killing for your organization. You want to avoid it. That's what you really strive to do. So pushing up the PF curve, working back up, we want to catch those problems with those assets as early as we can. If you're starting from the lower part, basic PM routines like automatic reminders, monthly checks, or weekly inspections, or filter changes, or whatever the standard operations for maintenance are, you want to at least be on a calendar-based reminded to do that. As we push up the curve even further, going closer to the P, we can start to use more advanced concepts like meter reading-based PMs, eventually IoT, sensors from those assets that can tell us when those assets are in distress earlier than we as humans can detect these things. The goal of maintenance operations is to push up the PF curve. Being a PM All-Star, you are active actively pushing up that PF curve. And that's where you get more proactive and in control. And a lot of what we're going to talk about today is to help you do that. So let's start with crawl. Well, the first thing you need to do when you crawl is to make sure you've got a good CMMS solution. And if you have one today, if it's a homegrown or a spreadsheet or something you have that's not properly implemented, I don't think that really counts. It's got to be a good quality CMMS system. And it's not just the software. You need to make sure you partner with an organization that can give you the training and the consulting services to really help you identify where you need to make those improvements. We use that Apple model that I said before. And I'm not talking about having tons of consultants camped out in your office for weeks or months at a time. I'm talking about a healthy, budget-friendly dose of those services so you can have the software and get that software off the ground so you can achieve those goals and objectives. Bill, you want to just talk a little bit about that because I know you've been through that before.
Sure. So here again, this is going to be the basis for your entire framework in the future. This is going to be the bedrock of your data and all of that. So really knowing where you're at going into this portion is critical because it'll build you up for where you're going from here. I've vetted many systems, and you know, like Paul said, you have to have quality here.
Thanks, Bill. So when you're crawling, and now we're in the software, and I know these things are kind of hard to read, but general themes here, when you're crawling, when you're first getting started, the most important thing you need to do, and it's funny, a lot of people I've looked at a poorly implemented CMS, and they don't even have their basic assets in the system. They're just typing in work orders. You've got to get your critical assets in the system. You don't have to put all your assets in there, but the ones that really hurt when they're not properly maintained. That might be 10 assets, it might be 100 assets. Eventually you'll get more and more assets. So they have to be in there. In our case, you can classify your assets, criticality, and so forth. You can have basic information, make, model, serial number, or you can go way deeper than that, warranty information, condition, purchasing information, and so forth. But when you're going to crawl, it's really important. I know we had a comment here from Bill on this one as well.
This is the point of buy-in. Getting somebody to agree to a CMMS is relatively simple. There's value there. Once you are there and you're ready to start rolling out this preventative maintenance program, allowing them to release the machines is where it gets very tricky and very difficult. You may need to sacrifice a little bit now to make it up later. So what I mean there is it may be easier to take a relatively inert machine group, if you will, and leverage the data that you'll get out of this, show the improvement, and then roll it out to more impressive machine groups. That's what we did here. I've done it elsewhere, and we've gone the other way, where we capture very volatile pieces of equipment and jump right in on it, and it works out well there. You really have to know your company's culture and what's going to work for you.
That's a really interesting point. Not necessarily your most important assets that are running 24/7, which you're going to have a difficult time getting a hold of, but the assets that will be excellent candidates to show those small victories is your point, right? And that's a great suggestion. Crawling, you need to put your basic PMs. The assets that you select that are going to participate in this, you need to set up basic preventive maintenance reminders. And it can be as simple as here, and when you look around the screen here, you know, this is a basic press alignment inspection. On the upper right-hand corner, you can see that it's scheduled to be done on a monthly basis on the first Tuesday of every month. And on the lower right, it has some basic instructions. You can have, without much effort, you can build a preventive maintenance reminder for your monthly, your weekly, your quarterly inspections that you really need to do to be the first line of defense against while you're pushing up that PF curve with minimal effort. If you don't have all your step-by-step instructions, don't sweat that. At least refer to your internal standard operating procedure that you can use. But you've got to get those automatic reminders to start to come into the system to remind people. Because in the case of Asset Essentials, the Dude Solutions product, it'll automatically email the appropriate people with those instructions. But you've got to get it scheduled, and you've got to get it on the radar. You also want to consider, sorry, I went one too many. You also can consider having documentation. Like if you have maintenance routines in a Word document, or you have videos, or you have other images or whatever they may be, you can put those and associate those to those PM routines or to those assets. That's often helpful in advance of building out more detailed step-by-step instructions in the system. You also, in your crawling phase, everybody on the team, your maintenance team, needs to know what work are they faced with that day. When you log in Asset Essentials, right there on your dashboard, and this is sort of the upper left-hand corner in that Work Center screen, we know how many, I know as a technician when I log in, how many preventive maintenance work orders, how many corrective maintenance, how many are overdue. If I'm a supervisor, I have visibility into my team's work. So and at the end of the day, that's the lower left-hand corner there. That's just a list of all the work orders that are ongoing in your facility. Again, if it's you as a technician or if you're a supervisor and it's the men and women who are working that stuff, to have good, accurate visibility of what is going on, what are the priorities of those work orders, how long have they been sitting around. The upper right, that can be done in your mobile device as well. With an Android or an iPhone mobile device, tablet, whatever you're using, you have the ability to have that same information wherever you are walking around that plant. And then have visibility into your PM schedule looking into the future. That's the lower right-hand corner. So you can share that with your, say, production supervisor and coordinate the work that's going on. By adding those assets in the system, by building those basic preventive maintenance reminders, you really start to get a handle on what that workload is. And that's one of the key steps in the crawl phase. So we're getting into walk now. When you're starting to walk, things are starting to go a little better. And I think this is where you're starting to move away from that 0% preventive, 100% corrective, and you're making good incremental improvements. Again, so small wins foster cultural change, and you start to want to get more out of the software, and you start to move closer to that PM all-star status. So when we're walking, there's a number of areas that we have in the system that can help with this. For example, left-hand side of the screen right here is our scheduling, our job scheduling tool. And you see those lists of names with the greens and the reds in the upper left-hand corner. That's my team. And my team has a variety of work orders they're working on for a given period. This is a week view that we're looking at right here. And I can see because some of them are in red, they are overutilized. They are scheduled for more work than they can handle. Others have capacity. They're in green. So part of the challenge of becoming a PM All-Star is you really want to make sure that your staff is properly allocated to the appropriate work. Having this visibility into the work orders with a system like this, I can use that bottom part of the screen. I can move work orders around. I can swap people in and out. And what that'll do is help me balance out my schedule so I have a better handle of what people are doing. Other aspects of walk and dynamic scheduling is you're going to start to get a little bit more intelligent about the way you schedule your preventive maintenance. For example, and it's highlighted at the bottom there, that yellow highlight. But in summary, I've seen a lot of times where people are attempting to get a handle on their PMs, and they put a bunch of assets in the system, and they put a whole bunch of PMs in the system that they have no prayer of getting to. They're not culturally, they're not operationally ready to get that point. So why do you have a weekly PM show up week after week after week if you're not getting to the previous ones? Next thing you know, you're overwhelmed with too many PMs. Well, we're going to try to steer you away from doing that in the first place, but there are tools, dynamic scheduling tools that say things like, if a PM is generated for a Thursday and you didn't get to the last Thursday, you can optionally not create the next one until you get the previous one done, or skip it. So you want to start to make sure that your software can intelligently map with your operations, because we don't always get to the PMs we want to. We strive to, but you want to make sure the software is working with you and not overwhelming. Meter reading based PMs. This is the concept where we're moving away from calendar scheduled PMs, daily, weekly, monthly, and moving into things like if I hit 1,000 hours of runtime, or I hit 100,000 cycle count, or I've created 300,000 widgets, or whatever the metrics are that tell you that you need to maintain that asset in some way, shape, or form. That's that sort of upper left. The lower left is maybe we have readings that come in in the form of like a PSI. If it's outside of our acceptable 40 to 60 PSI, that may indicate that a work order needs to be created to check that situation out. Maybe we know that that is bad when those things happen. So meter reading based PMs, you can enter those meter readings in your mobile device. You can enter it in the browser. You can even get that data directly off the assets with an IoT, an Internet of Things base, which we'll talk about later. At the end of the day, you're going to get those instructions, those work orders to be created instead of on a calendar basis, more intelligently based on usage. Walk. We're still in walk, and we're talking about safety. Dude Solutions Asset Essentials has a safety module integrated with it. So safety is so aligned with maintenance. So things like lockout, tagout procedures, safety data sheets, permitting, job safety assessments, if you use those or want to use those, you can build a library of those. They can be associated with your PMs and even your corrective maintenance work orders if appropriate. And the bottom line is when we're going to do these work orders, make that safety information be right at our fingertips, even possibly requiring the technician to sign off that they read that. We even extend it to OSHA 300 loggable incidents and things of that nature. But it's a great way to tackle safety with maintenance operations, which all in all will create a better operating environment. And the final example when we're walking is around spare parts. With spare parts, and again, I put this under walk. It's hard to take on parts and procurement in your initial implementation in CMS. I find it to be a bit of an overwhelming task for most. So maybe consider that as the next phase when you're starting to walk. And it starts with building a good library of all the parts that you stock or the parts that you don't stock. You can build out a list of all the parts that you use for individual assets, the bill of materials. You can build out when you're creating a PM, you can specify what parts you're going to need for that PM, whether you're going to dispatch it immediately, you're going to do a part reservation, you're going to do a just-in-time ordering process. The worst, when you're in firefighting mode, one of the worst things that happens is, oh my gosh, we need a part. I'm going to have to go across the plant to figure out, do I have that part? I'm going to look in the stock room, only to get over there and find out you don't have the part. And then you're going to have to order it, find out it's out of stock. It's not going to be there for 3 days. And those are the killers that just make a bad situation go much worse, stockouts. We really want to try to avoid those by proactively managing our parts, by proactively managing the procurement process that goes with that. We can get that process under control. And those are key elements to moving into that more proactive, that more PM all-star mode. Run. So now we're getting into advanced topics. And I'm not saying that to hit 80-20, the SMRP stable threshold, or even 90-10, I'm not saying you have to get to this run level. Lots of clients get to that PM all-star status without coming to this point. But what you get in these run areas is taking things to the next level. This is where you can really dramatically improve things like profitability, really get a handle on stuff. So IoT, the Internet of Things. And that imagery on the right-hand side is sort of an image to convey your assets throughout your facility, especially modern assets, HVAC, production assets, it doesn't matter. Moving assets, they probably have sensors built into them. They probably have the ability to hand the CMMS system those meter readings, those metrics, that data, basically tracking real-time health of those assets. And even if they're older assets, in today's day and age, you can get low-cost sensors that can be essentially bolted on. I'm simplifying, and this takes a more detailed conversation, but they can be retrofitted. And with this wonderful thing called the Internet of Things, that data can be transmitted to basically tell your CMMS, to tell Asset Essentials when these assets are not feeling well and when to do that maintenance. At the end of the day, it's all about automated work order creation, preventive or corrective. And this is an area that can really help you get even closer or surpass all the way up to that 90-10 ratio. A good example of ROI on the Internet of Things, ROI, return on investment. So here's a good example. You're doing a preventive maintenance on a major production asset once a month, a regular schedule, like clockwork. First Monday of the month, every 4.5 weeks, whatever that is, you're doing the PM on that asset. Now, for simplicity, this is a 24/7 operation, so we know we're going to have to ask for that asset to maintain it. So we have downtime, and most people can measure when your asset's down, it can't produce what it needs to produce, and that costs your organization some money. So for simple math, this 3 hours costs us $2,500. You've also got parts, you've got labor. To do this PM 12 times a year, you're looking at spending, in this simple example, close to $35,000. That's a lot of money, but it's way less than if this asset was not properly maintained. Now, fast forward from a calendar-based example to an Internet of Things, a predictive example. Instead of doing it on a regular clockwork once a month, if we're getting usage information from those assets, runtime, hours run, cycle counts, whatever it may be, and it turns out we don't have to do that PM every 4.5 weeks, once a month, we're doing it every 6 to 7 weeks. It depends upon cycles and time of year. But when we need to do it, but it's certainly not once a month. We still have our labor, parts, we still have our downtime, but instead of doing this 12 times a year, we're only doing it 8.6 times a year. It's saving us in just pure maintenance-related costs $10,000 a year. That's a significant ROI, and the asset theoretically is being maintained just as well as it was when we use a calendar-based preventive maintenance. So there really is ROI when you look at an Internet of Things predictive strategy. Again, we're in the run phase here, but if you're looking at IoT and how it can benefit your plant, you definitely want to reach out and look into this kind of stuff. The last one we're going to talk about in run is one of my favorites, is total productive maintenance, or probably more specifically, autonomous maintenance. And this is a whole lecture series on itself, so I'm going to give you just a really quick highlights. If you're not familiar with TPM and autonomous maintenance, it's something you really should take a look at. Autonomous maintenance is one of the pillars of total productive maintenance. And the steps on the right-hand side of the screen there, basically what we're doing in TPM is we're letting the people on the front lines that spend a lot of time with those assets, the operators, the production-oriented, those people that are on the front lines that see these assets every day, that really we want them to own those assets. They are as much responsible for maintenance as the maintenance team, or at least at identifying when problems occur. The principles of autonomous maintenance start off, the assets have to be clean. You have to be able to see when there's problems with those assets, smell when there's problems. You need to eliminate contamination sources. Then you start to get into step 3 there is you can train operators to do very basic preventive maintenance tasks safely, securely, but all in the spirit of this TPM autonomous maintenance. And as you step up these TPM steps, you start to catch your operators and the people on those front lines through autonomous maintenance, through TPM, can really catch problems early. That's going to really help you push up that PF curve. Examples here. The before and the after, that's actually the same asset shot from a very different angle, but you see the before, that is a dirty asset. You can't tell if there's hydraulic fluid leaking. You can't smell something. It probably all smells. It's just so poorly kept clean. If you look at the after, you're going to clear as day see if there's a problem with a fluid leak or something that traditionally could be caught with a visual inspection. And who better to do that than an operator who's going to be looking at that asset off and on over the course of that shift? Another example on the right here is you may have to expose things safely that traditionally don't get figured to be a problem until way too late. In this particular example, that chain, that cog there, it would come out of alignment, and we didn't know it until that thing was making noise, or worse yet, failed. By simply placing a Lexan cover as opposed to a steel cover, so you've got your safety issues completely covered, we can make a visual inspection and catch those things earlier. With TPM, you're equipping your operators to find the problems, to make sure as a maintenance and an engineering organization we get those equipment to optimal conditions, and to make sure those front line of defense, those operators, through an implementation of a CMMS the basic chores can really help catch those problems very early. Now, I know, Bill, you've got some experience around this. Would you mind going ahead and give us some commentary?
Sure. So as we move towards becoming truly predictive and preventative, we actually instituted a full sign-off of operator maintenance. They track this within Facility Dude or Asset Essentials, and we can real-time get their input as they proceed through a day. Things as simple as we've got CNC machines that require chip conveyors to be cleaned out on a regular basis. Used to be very reactive. Our maintenance guys would get a phone call a couple times a week. It is now part of a shift change procedure, and operators are completing it daily.
I love it. TPM is one of those areas that, if again, some of you on this call might be actively embracing TPM and using it in your plant like Bill is. You will reap those benefits. If you're not, take a look. It's a wonderful methodology. All right, what are some of the benefits? Well, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. It's one of my favorite quotes. It's a foundation for what CMMS does. Ben Franklin said it best. It's all about minimizing unnecessary downtime. I mean, downtime is a profit killer. Preserving your assets that live longer. That's saving you from capital expenditures. As long as you're able to produce, why not stretch the life of those assets? And a well-run preventive maintenance environment will do that. You're going to make better products, better quality. You're going to consume less energy or other stream-based commodities. You're going to make it so much easier for your maintenance planning, working with your production people, as Bill said, and helping with that cultural aspect of getting access, because they're going to like the fact that their assets, production is going to like the fact those assets are running better, they're running longer, there's less downtime. They're going to be willing to work with you. At the end of the day, it's profitability. We did a study with our Dude Solutions All-Stars. The ones that qualified for the all-star status, they had a minimum threshold of preventive maintenance, 37% decrease in work order costs, 65% reduction in emergency work orders. That will translate to just a better operating environment. That'll translate to better profitability. And there's a number of other industry stats. You can look and read these on the screen right here, but the bottom line is a proactive, preventive environment. You're using less energy. You're saving bottom line. You're saving bottom line maintenance expenses significantly, 12 to 18%. You're making your assets last longer, 35 to 50%. It's the return on investment of doing this, as compared to being in that firefighting end of the spectrum, is significant, and it's obvious. So let's just talk for just a couple more moments about the future, and then we'll have some parting comments, and we'll be turning it over to Q&A. So at Dude Solutions, we're taking all of this analysis that comes from all this data in the system in our Dude Intelligence platform. So I used to think of CMMS as a system of record. It's just a list of all your work orders and all your assets. And sure, there's reporting and analysis in there. But now it's moving to the point of a system of intelligence, pinpointing to you where we can really make improvements, where we're really doing well, where we're really challenged. This concept of a data lake at the center of here, there is data all over the place. In your upper left hand, we got our facility. You got all kinds of data from your assets, production-oriented data, usage-oriented data, from anywhere in your asset. We've got data from things like weather, from vendors, from market information. We've got experiences of our customers around the globe. All of that information that is in that goes in that data lake, and that information ends up in our Dude Intelligence platform. Appropriate information ends up in that platform so that you can do things like analyze. You can analyze, I've got an air compressor. How does this the same make and model air compressor compare with other compressors that I have in my other facilities, whether they be in other plants or in other aspects of my plant? And how does it compare? And what can I do? Can I inherit some of the PM routines from those other assets to make it better? That Dude Intelligence platform takes it to a whole nother level. Another really cool thing that I'm studying, and that's one of my roles at Dude Solutions, is to study future technologies, and this is definitely a future technology, is the concept of the interface of things. Wearables, things like augmented reality, assisted reality, virtual reality, and wearables in general. That goofy-looking guy in the upper right there with the goggles there, that's an augmented reality headset. And that technician can look through that, but when they do, they're looking down at their asset they're maintaining. The word "please go to the first screw" is not really there. If they took those goggles off, they wouldn't see it. That bolt is not really in green, but because we can augment things and we can show them, hey, you need to turn that nut with that torque wrench. If they turn the wrong one, see how it highlights in red. So this is future technology. It's not that far off in the future, but even things like selecting the right parts and having that. With the aging workforce and making it easy to transition to new maintenance technicians, tools like this will really help make that better. And you want to really, when you're partnering with a CMMS organization, that you need to be with somebody who's really thinking and looking at this future type stuff. So, recap and conclusion. Before I turn it over to Bill for some of his the victories he's done with all this, is first off, know where you are and own it. Don't stick your head in the sand. Don't think it can never get better. Get your team to agree, to buy in, to start to really think about where are our problems happening, how can we make it better. And that's what we do. That APA model, we are there to help foster those conversations, to help get into that continuous improvement mode, crawl, walk, run, and then you will start to see those positive results, and then you will be one of those people that are going to be in that beach lawn chair as opposed to that full-time firefighter. Now, Bill, I know you've had great success with this. Can you go ahead and make some closing comments on some of that, please?
Sure. At the bottom line, and at the end of the day, for most people, this really comes back to cost and the impact to bottom line. So I'll use the current facility as an example, and then I've got some other smaller examples. Here, when I walked in, we had a very, very high maintenance budget. Considering the square footage and infrastructure that was here, it was extremely high. We were actually able to cut about 40% out of that simply by instituting very basic PM and rolling that cost savings forward. So what I mean there is reactive maintenance takes longer than preventative and proactive maintenance. So as we engaged in more preventative and proactive maintenance policies, we were able to start bringing more in-house. As an example, we canceled a very large HVAC contract and built that into our preventative maintenance program going forward. The only other big thing here, and this is one thing that I've seen others struggle with on the consulting side, is be honest with yourself and be honest with your team about where you're at currently and the roadmap to get where it is that you and your organization want to be. Too often, complacency is where this all starts to fall apart.
Love it. I love it. I love these real-world stories. Well, we're at the end of the lecture portion. I believe we've got one more quick poll just for further information. And then I know we've got a bunch of questions already coming in. If anybody else has additional questions, they can type them in. But I think we're going to have that poll question put up. So while this is just for future information, so just leave that up for a second here. So I think, Kevin, when you're ready, we can probably start taking some of these questions.
Well, thanks, Paul. We have got a lot of good questions, and I want to get to them as quickly as we can so we can get more of them. The first questions that I have are basically around the psychology or sociology of predictive maintenance, and that is, you talked about return on investment. So obviously, if you want to get management buy-in, the best way to do that is to show them demonstrate to them what the return on investment would be. But one of our listeners is asking is, above and beyond that, what are some tips or some ideas that you've used successfully to convince management of the need to move further along on this continuum of basic maintenance procedures to the more sophisticated ones?
Well, I'm going to make a very quick comment. I think Bill might be able to have better feedback than me, but you hit it correctly in a phrase you said, Kevin, and the question is, you got to steer the conversation away from the costs or the efforts to what are the benefits of going, because you got to gear up for going into a proactive, to become a PM All-Star. You're going to have to gear up for it, not only in the human buy-in, but also the time it's going to take and to get the cultural changes. And that's key to start to see those changes. But, Bill, you've lived it more than me. You have any comments on that?
Yeah. So based on the question, it sounds like the asker is already proceeding down the preventative maintenance pipeline. The proof is in the data. If you're PMing pieces of equipment properly, the ability to demonstrate that value is already in the data. You've just got to extrapolate it. So take a look at where you were, compare it to where you are, and evidence how you can move forward. Tried and true, that's the best method.
Good. Thanks, Bill. So now you've convinced management that this is the right thing to do. I don't know which is harder, convincing management or convincing the people on the plant floor that are actually doing the work. They love their work. Sometimes they resist change. Talk a little bit about the methods for working with the maintenance department itself to get them to buy in and believe in preventive maintenance.
I think I'm going to do the tandem again. I got a quick comment. I'm sure Bill's got some better than me. But one thing I can tell you, being around CMMS for a long time now, the least happy end users, the maintenance people, are the ones that just showed up for work on a Monday, and to have their manager tell them, "Hey, we're going to have a new software you're going to start using today. Enjoy." You got to have your maintenance team correctly or appropriately involved, even in the search, in the conversations, in figuring out what the goals, the objectives, the pain points are. Don't cram software down their throat. I'm not saying they can drive the whole process, but you need their voice, and that will get buy-in, and that will help that transition go smoother. Bill, you have anything to add to that? I'm sure you do.
Absolutely. I've always found that, maintenance guys are already doing the work. The best thing that I typically tell a maintenance guy to get them to come around, far more on the consulting side than in a building I'm working at, is you're already doing the work. Take the credit for it. Often, there's always a concern that, there's not enough hours in a day and all of these things. Well, you can evidence that. Take the credit for what it is you're doing and help steer the company in the right direction by doing so.
Great. I think this is an interesting question. Someone, if I understand correctly, is asking about making machine-to-machine comparisons within a predictive maintenance environment, and to what degree they cite the instance where the two machines are the same make and model, but were purchased 3 years apart. How much variance would be expected between the performance of one machine or another? And then more generally, just talk about what can be gained by managing an entire fleet of assets as opposed to just the individual assets themselves.
I can't comment on the specific, what does 2 years difference make in that, because that involves so many local factors. But I will tell you this. There's all kinds of analysis in a properly implemented CMMS system. When I say properly implemented, you have all those assets in there. They're properly categorized. There is a relationship between them because of make and model or categorization or whatever it may be. So you can do all kinds of side-by-side comparative trend-based analysis, and that's native to the Asset Essentials product. That's part of the Dude Intelligence solution. But that's a big part of what you're trying to do. You're trying to not only be a PM All-Star, but you're looking for those Asset All-Stars, those well-performing ones, so you can do some forensics. Why? Is it the contractor you're using, or is it a solid PM plan? And can we implement that in some of these other similar assets? Maybe they're different ages, maybe they're the same age. But having that data, having that evidence, as Bill says, is a good example. Bill, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I guess really the like you said, the 2-year thing that, there's so many different types of equipment out there. It's hard to identify anything specific there. I will say that I have actually seen it on my end where we have two very similar pieces of equipment, almost actually two identical pieces of equipment, built by manufacturer back to back, each with their very own unique set of difficulties. And it's usually based on product that we're running within that piece of equipment. When we notice that and we see it coming in and on the reactive side, we then roll that in and create that as a predictive issue. So we roll that into a preventative maintenance standpoint when we routinely see the same issue repeating. Great.
Another question, someone's asking about 24/7 operations and how that changes the ability to move along this path towards predictive maintenance, and what are some of the things that can be done within that kind of environment that overcome the challenge of not being able to see the equipment in a down state, as it were.
Bill, you want to take that one first?
Absolutely. So we run 24/7 here. And it was not until after we took relatively small machine groups that weren't running high priority parts that we were able to evidence the benefit of truly being preventative. When we did so, it was much easier to work with procuring and planning and everybody else and rolling out defined times that we could take those machines for PM. I will say that initially we started with a calendar-based program. On those highly volatile machines, we are now doing it based on production run hours, and that gives production and planning a much better window to know when we're going to need those for PM. We talk about that on a quarterly basis based on forecast, and then we build those PM times into that.
Yeah, there's another. That's a great example. Obviously, real world. There's other little tricks that you can do too. One of my particular favorites is Pitstop Maintenance, and that is, downtime is inevitable. I mean, it's going to happen. A really savvy maintenance supervisor, when that asset goes down, say for corrective maintenance reasons, and production's on the radio with you, and all hands, we got to get it fixed. That's a given. But that really calm, cool, and collected maintenance foreman will take a look and see, is there any preventive maintenance that we can sneak in while that asset is available to us? Maybe there is. Maybe you can get that done. So there's other tricks and tools that you can sneak in at opportune times. Pitstop Maintenance would be a good example. And you can manage that, just the accessibility of that information directly in Asset Essentials. So.
Great, thanks. Now, here's another question where someone is saying that they're working with decreasing maintenance budgets constantly, and also alluding to a really important issue, and that's the increasing lack of skilled laborers. I mean, just constantly in my role as an editor, I'm talking to people who are saying, our workforce is changing. We have the older veterans who know a lot about the equipment, but they don't understand the newest systems for managing it. And on the other hand, we have some young people who are totally enthusiastic about using the latest technology to track performance, et cetera, but they just don't have the intuitive insights that the veterans have. Could you talk a little bit about that and how you manage that, or is it in fact something that you encounter in your daily work as well?
Bill, why don't I take this from a high level and what we're doing at Dude Solutions, and then I'm sure you've got some great real-world insight. But this is obviously an incredibly important current event topic where we are actively hearing this from our customers, we're actively hearing this from the marketplace, and we are actively pursuing this. We're looking at, I think, almost 5 generations of people in the workforce with the people working longer. And you hit it on the head. It's such a wide variety of people with different skill sets and even different mentalities about how maintenance should be done. I think at the end of the day, it comes back to those foundational topics of your CMMS has to be implemented with all of those voices in mind. So for your older generation that might not be as comfortable with a mobile device, but you want them to use it, and we're all getting more and more comfortable, even those of us with gray hair are getting more and more comfortable with these devices. You've got to have excellent training. You have to show them the value and so forth. And for the younger generation, with those same devices, to have that intelligence that older generation has in their head directly available to them. So when they walk up and scan an asset, and they can pull up the PM routine on that asset, and they can see what that veteran was able to help make sure gets in the system with step-by-step instructions, possibly even a video showing how to do it. We have to come all ends of that age spectrum to really make sure that, at least from the perspective of the software, it's readily available to them so we can help manage this transition that we're seeing in the manufacturing marketplace. Bill, do you have any stories about this one?
No specific stories, but you did hit the nail on the head. Exactly what we're doing here. We take standard operating procedures, we build them into the preventive maintenance programs. We're showing our technicians how to pull up that history of all work requests and all items for any given asset, so that anybody can go in and search a fault code and find what the last guy did and how it was resolved. And that's just key to bridging that gap.
Good. Well, I can't help but ask a follow-up question to that, because 2 of our listeners are asking the same thing, and that is, what if you've done all that? You've educated your workforce, you've primed them for use of additional layers of technology, but they just won't get over the hump. They just continue to resist, and they continue to resist. Have you ever been in a situation where at some point push comes to shove?
From my more academic market perspective, that screams to me the system was not implemented in such a manner where that return on investment of their time is evident to them. So a well-implemented system that was phased in with the buy-in from the appropriate people, it's really hard to get that attitude. Something went wrong somewhere along the way. And you probably either don't have the right software, and you certainly didn't probably have the right processes or people to help you get that off the ground. That's why this is it's a combination of software and services. But you've got to mentally get people to buy into this before the software is going to really benefit them. And forcing them to use it, I've seen it work, that slam your fist on the desk until they start using it. I personally like to intelligently challenge people to say, hey, this would be better. Well, what's going to make this better? And then let's make sure the software is going to reflect and truly give you that benefit that you need. Bill, you have any comments on that?
Again, it's all about how it's presented. I have been on both sides of that spectrum. My very first rollout on a CMMS is exactly what we did. We selected the system in a closed room, and we went to the technicians 3 weeks later and said, here it is, you guys got to run with it. Some of them were very receptive. Others never really came around for quite some time. We really had to sit back down and go back to the drawing board, find out what we were lacking in the system, and then find some ways to institute what they really wanted. Buy-in is critical with any system like this, and it's not just the maintenance guys. It's the requesters, the operators. Everybody has to kind of align on this.
Well, thanks, Bill. We're coming to the end of our broadcast time. I'm going to ask one final question, and that is about the technology side of it, IIoT or IoT, however you choose to express it. Is going to predictive maintenance dependent on having that kind of real-time monitoring, or are there ways that you can move towards predictive maintenance before you've actually got the additional sensors, and you've got the connectivity that's needed, or even the analytics that are involved. And then, number two, just if I could get your insight into how active the people that you talk to are in moving towards getting that IIoT installed in the plants, so that not just in maintenance but even in process control, they can start to improve optimization as well as reliability.
IIoT, the sensors, the physical side is automatic delivery of data that humans have been typing into CMMS, or in the case of our product, Asset Essentials, for 2 decades. You can go in and with a mobile device or on your browser type in how many hours that asset ran, or you could type in what the pressure reading is on that asset, whatever the metrics are, and all of that logic will kick in. So you absolutely can start using a meter reading based predictive type of strategy, say as opposed to a calendar based, and start to reap those benefits even if you're not physically or digitally connected to any of your assets. In time, as these sensors become more readily available and that data becomes easier to acquire, in answering your second question, it's a pretty small percentage of clients that are actively doing this. There's a big percentage that are thinking about it. But if you're not there yet, if you want to start to reap the benefits of that predictive meter reading base, absolutely. We have the whole engine to do it. And then when you are ready to get that data acquired electronically, well, all the better. You save yourself from having to type that data in. You don't fat finger, type the wrong values, etc. I don't know, Bill, if you have any experience around this.
Yeah, so I'm in a 50-50 state myself on IIoT, in that some of our machines were already smart, and we've started to extrapolate that data. We're still manually inputting it, but we're getting canned reports directly from the machines. What I can say is, when the question is, can we become predictive without IIoT? You can extrapolate a lot of data from your reactive requests. That's the first step that I took in being able to get us after that 80% mark. So once a month I'd sit down and, you start looking at the history of a work order for a machine, and you can very easily identify if there are items that should be getting looped into your preventative maintenance program on a regular basis, or if there's a bigger issue that you need to be looking into. So I think, yes, you can start that process, but I will say that at some point, if you truly want to become that next level, you have to start looking at some level of IIoT.
Great. Well, thanks, guys, for making this such an insightful program. And that's all the questions we have time for today. Besides thanking our speakers, I'd like to thank our attendees for joining us, and we hope it suited your purposes. For more information, go to the website links noted in the interface. I'd like to thank Dude Solutions for sponsoring today's webcast, and now that we're just about done, we want to hear how we did. The exit survey will pop up on your screen as soon as this webcast ends. Please take a moment to complete it, as we use this information to improve our webcasts. On behalf of CFE Media and Technology, we look forward to seeing you next time. Have a good day.